I'm Anna, and I am recording and uploading my writer's survival tips, which I've been posting on Twitter for the last couple of years. These are specifically for playwrights and screenwriters, but really it would work for any kind of writer or artist, really. Lots of sort of crossover. So my writer's survival tip number 6 is look for different types of conflict in your work. I'll explain what I mean by that. I ultimately have this thing I'm going to explain as a way of, it's kind of like a troubleshooting tool for me. So I used to have them up on index cards and I lost them in the move, but I'm going to go back and find them, or I'm going to do them again because they were incredibly useful. The 3 different types of conflict. So number 1 is interpersonal conflict. So it's conflict between your character and the other people in their lives. Romantic relationships, family, professional relationships, children, all of that stuff. So obviously very clear the sort of conflict that might be caused by your interpersonal relationships. Inner conflict. So that is how you see yourself, dealing with your own thoughts and feelings, your past experiences, beliefs and ambitions. So basically the conflict of what's going on inside, how your self-beliefs impact your situation, impact the drama. And then extrapersonal conflict, which is conflict from an, let me get this right, conflict from an outside source, which is not a person in your life. So for example, nature, expectations of society, police, the army, an illness or a war. So I used to have these 3 cards up in my workspace, and of course they are the building blocks of stories. Stories are about change and conflict. Drama is conflict, and sort of breaking it down into these 3 types of conflict is really interesting and helpful. Now, as I said, I would tend to use these as a sort of troubleshooting technique, in that I still get notes now, like years and years into my career of writing. Where's the conflict in this scene? Where's the drama? What's at stake? And I think, how have I come this far? And I'm still writing scenes without, like flabby scenes without conflict in. So when I'm up against a sense that things aren't working, it's really useful for me to look at these different types of conflict. You don't need to see these again, do I? Pathetic. And see what your character is experiencing at any one time, and can you adjust, can you add to the different types of conflict. And I found it a really, really useful technique. Now obviously it's useful to think about the different types of conflict at the beginning of a process, at the beginning of making a story. I'm aware that it might sound a little bit sort of haphazard and slapdash, that sort of I'm thinking about these things when I'm quite far into the process. I tend to be quite an instinctive and intuitive writer, so a lot of specific writing techniques or theories don't really appeal to me, because as soon as I'm made to feel like there's rules, it really sort of makes me feel turned off from what I'm doing. And I like to believe that there's no rules, or I'm making them up as I go along. And sometimes people ask me about what's my technique or my process. And I always say that my technique I call pissing in the wind, because I honestly don't have a fucking clue what I'm doing most of the time. And I deal with each project as it happens. I use past experience, but I also sort of cling desperately to the people I'm working with, and sort of take from them. I I might delve into other art that's made on the same subject or with a I can't speak today, with a similar form. I might there's all sorts of different ways it works. So there's no one way for me. And that's why I call it pissing in the wind, because I'm like, how am I going to do this? I don't know. Let's just try some different stuff. So for a long time, I felt I'm doing it wrong. I'm doing it wrong. I don't have a degree. I trained at drama school as an actor. I don't have theory behind me. I haven't, I mean, of course, I've read lots of plays. I've seen lots of plays. I've seen lots of telly, but I'm not a hugely well read person. Um, I'm making it up as I go along. And for a long time, I berated myself for this. And like, it's just recently that I'm learning to go, but that's just the way it is for you. That's just the way it is for you. And that's okay. I move from project to project. Some are more difficult than others. One thing that works for one project won't work for another. Because in an ideal world, it's those different types of conflict are going to be really clear and present from the beginning of the work. But there is no such thing as an ideal world. And looking for an ideal world is the sort of thing that stops us sitting down to work because we don't feel inspired. And that is the enemy of productivity, basically. We just work. We just work. We have to. And that's why I often say about the little things that I do, this is a tool, not a rule. So, and I say the same to actors when I'm teaching acting and stuff. Find things that work for you. Find tools, but they're not rules. You don't have to do them. You don't have to have a sort of set, rigid. Some people will like to have a set or a ritual or whatever of things they do when they're writing or when they're making art or performing or whatever. But I think it's important to know that you don't have to do that. And also, in the same sort of vein or in the same sort of spirit of that, I first read about the three different types of conflict either in Into the Woods by John Yorke or Playwriting by Stephen Jeffries. And I've looked for both and I can't find either, so I can't tell you which one I first read it from. But similarly to kind of using things as and when I want them, I really dip in and out of those books, which are not just those two books, but there's a lot of brilliant books out there which give huge reassurance, inspiration, huge guide that demystify. Into the Woods is one of them. Stephen Jeffries' Playwriting is another. Artist's Way is something I'm doing it at the moment. I'll do another vid on that. But Artist's Way, Writing Down the Bones. This is really interesting. This is Wired for Story by Lisa Cron. This is by Natalie Goldberg. This is about the what's that word about the brain? The brain's cognitive need for story, the cognitive urgency for story that we all have to make sense of something in the form of a story, which is really exciting. But again, with John Yorke's book, which for lots of people is like a very precious thing, I tend to read like the first third of it every few years. And I keep going, Anna, you must read the end of it. And then I'm like, well, okay, well, what I'm doing is okay. I'm getting by. So yeah, so this vid was about looking for different types of conflict in your work and seeing if you can up the conflict, but also just dipping in and out of things, being free and easy with yourself, and just finding what works for you and being okay with that.